Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack something truly chilling today. We are diving deep into the horrific universe of Miguel Saronic's Haylee's Crossing. Now, this isn't just your standard collection of scary stories. It's honestly a masterclass in geographic horror. We're looking at a Midwestern town built quite literally on a foundation of pure evil. Let's just launch right into the nightmare with this stark quote from the historical preface of the anthology. It perfectly establishes the grim origin of our subject today. We aren't dealing with a typical haunted house or a single cursed object here. No, we're dealing with an entire municipality whose very name is derived from a brutal, horrific execution.
I really want you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer. What actually happens to the people who live on cursed soil? Because this is the core mystery that infects every single resident we're about to discuss. It completely shapes their lives, their traumas, and ultimately their demises.
Okay, let's dive into this. On the surface, the town projects this deceivingly normal Kansas aesthetic. You have the idyllic rolling hills, the endless cornfields, that quaint Midwestern charm. But this welcoming facade is completely by design. It's literally the bait in a trap, luring people into an environment that is thoroughly saturated with malice.
But if you're thinking, hey, why not just pack up and leave when things get weird? Well, think again. This ominous tagline serves as the inescapable rule for the town. It warns us that geography is a trap, and no one truly gets away. Even if you physically cross the county line, the darkness of Haylee's Crossing has already latched onto your soul.
Part 1. The Witch of Pepperton.
To really understand this modern-day horror, we actually have to jump back to 1859, when this place was a promising pioneer settlement called Pepperton. That year, a beautiful 18-year-old named Haylee Blackwater arrived, but she was utilizing ancient witchcraft, actively draining the life from her new husband and sacrificing local children, specifically removing their eyes and tongues just to preserve her youth. Once the town figured this out, they stripped her, dragged her up Rapture Hill, cut out her tongue, gouged out her eyes, and crucified her for 72 agonizing hours. Over the decades, the site of Haylee's Cross just sort of morphed into the town name, Haylee's Crossing.
So the crucial takeaway here is that the modern residents aren't just unlucky. The lore clearly states that Haylee's spilled blood seeped directly into the soil and the local water supply. Her vengeance is literally baked into the environment. The people living there are drinking, breathing, and walking on a witch's centuries-old hatred.
Part 2. The Teddy Bear Girl.
Now let's see how this cursed geography actually plays out in our first modern tale. We follow a guy named Brian, a man entirely blinded by a drunken, jealous rage. He becomes convinced his wife Jo is cheating on him, and he violently strangles her to death. But as she's dying, she's desperately trying to stutter out the word baby. Not as a pet name, but to tell him she had finally gotten pregnant. The overwhelming guilt leaves him isolated in a cheap motel in the Crossing to write his final testimony.
But he isn't actually alone in that motel room. And this is where the sensory nightmare really takes over. Brian is visited by the spirit of the daughter he murdered in the womb. But she's certainly no angel. She is a pale, demonic entity named Alice, leaking black tears from her eyes and carrying a tattered, vomit-smeared teddy bear named Anubis. She floats towards her father and eventually just hands him a straight-edge razor to finish the job.
And to make things even worse, she's chanting this poem. It turns out Jo, the murdered wife, was actually a famous children's author who created this exact rhyme for her books. The stark juxtaposition of this incredibly sweet, innocent children's rhyme coming from the snarling mouth of a malevolent entity dripping black liquid, well, it's exactly how this cursed town twists something beautiful into pure, unadulterated horror.
Part 3. The Pink Mist.
This town's evil doesn't care about borders. It can reach you even if you deploy thousands of miles away to the deserts of Iraq. We first have to clinically define this gruesome military slang to understand our next protagonist, a U.S. Army sniper named Drake. Over in Iraq, Drake is ordered to shoot an innocent 3-year-old child just to send a message to a terrorist target. Drake absolutely refuses. He steps away from his weapon, completely unable to pull the trigger. You can just feel the inescapable PTSD of what happens next. When Drake steps away, his spotter, Sergeant Brock the Beast King, takes the shot instead, actually celebrating the horrific pink mist they just created. In a moment of absolute disgust and blinding rage, Drake shoots his partner right between the eyes.
Years later, he returns to the crossing, completely haunted by the ghost of the man he killed.
Because remember that rule? The crossing follows you. The curse brings the ghost of the beast directly to a local baseball game at Wilson Field. This ghost forces Drake into an impossible, maddening ultimatum that perfectly mirrors his trauma in Iraq. Drake has to use a phantom sniper rifle to assassinate an innocent 6-year-old girl doing cartwheels in a yellow sundress, or he has to sit there and watch his own son be murdered by the beast. It's pure psychological torture, bred directly from the town's soil.
Part 4: Trash Bags and Trunks.
Shifting gears a bit, this next vignette gives us a darkly comedic look at everyday life on the outskirts of the crossing. We meet a guy named Cal, who's been pulled over on the side of Old Country Road. He is just calmly lying to a cynical, whiskey-breath Sheriff Higgins. Cal claims he's simply taking his kids for a drive to Dipper's Pond to get them away from their video games. A perfectly normal excuse, right? Except, Cal is wearing an ankle monitor, and the sheriff is highly suspicious of him testing his limits.
So the sheriff inspects the messy back seat, sees some juice boxes, a Game Boy, a child's diary, and eventually decides to let Cal go. But Cernak delays the horrific truth until the very end, dropping a brutal twist. As Cal drives away, he smirks. He wasn't gesturing to the children's toys in the back seat when he was talking to the sheriff. He was pointing towards his trunk, a trunk which is currently loaded with a dead body, stuffed inside heavy black trash bags.
Part 5: An Inescapable Curse.
These 3 stories, the domestic terror of the teddy bear girl, the psychological war trauma of the pink mist, and the cold-blooded reality of the trash bags, they barely scratch the surface. The sheer volume of evil in this universe is massive. Miguel Cernak has built an entire literary universe across 3 main books and an official historical companion. Each volume promises dozens of tales that explore the deep, rotting roots of a town that actively wants to make its readers lose their minds.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer, but I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. The foundational rule of this entire universe is that the curse spreads and it never lets you go. So, if the blood of a crucified witch is in the water and the town infects everyone who comes in contact with it, are you already infected just by learning about it today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, stay safe out there.